As we've been reporting, about 50 women and children kidnapped by Hamas could be released in the coming days if the temporary pause in the fighting holds. And a senior administration official says that 3 Americans will be among them, including 3-year-old Abigail Mooriden, whose birthday is just 2 days from now.
I think about her brother and sister who both watched their parents be murdered on October 7th. And Abigail coming home for them, for the grandparents, for the family, for all of us, is that one hope to have her back, embrace her. Her birthday is on Friday. She's turning 4. And to just imagine that she comes home and is with her family is our light right now in such a very dark and terribly horrific period.
And joining me now is Michael Oren, former Israeli ambassador to the United States, and Jeremy Bash, former chief of staff at the CIA and the Pentagon. Ambassador Oren, first of all, Brett McGurk did just reconfirm that Abigail will be among the initial hostages tomorrow. I guess will be released in time for her birthday on Friday. One hopes. Prime Minister Netanyahu, in his opening statement to the government.
Up here, Andrea. Let me just say personally, I've known the Naftali family for many, many years. And so everything's personal here. Everything's personal here. And I'm delighted for them, and I'm dying that Abigail is going to be reunited with her family. We can't say 100%, right? We're dealing with Hamas. It's not Hamas is not an honest broker. And they can change very, very easily. But we hope that this will come about. And simply we share in the joy of reunion of all the families of the hostages who will be released, but we cannot forget the roughly 180 families of hostages who can't be released. And that's painful. And we're also aware of the dangers of this agreement, the number of dangers, not the least of which that Hamas will reorganize, will regroup, set booby traps that will kill our soldiers, and then try to extend the ceasefire to a point where Hamas will basically win the war, because ceasefire means that Hamas gets away with mass murder. So a lot of fears mixed with the joys.
Indeed. I know that Israel has a lot of fears, and there's no trust on either side. The Prime Minister Netanyahu, in his opening statement to the government forum, said, quote, "I spoke with President Biden and I asked for his intervention in order to improve the outline that will be presented to you, and it was indeed improved." Yet, I guess the opposition of Ben-Gvir, the national security minister, shows that there is deep concern in Israel and deep division still politically.
Certainly. Israel has set 2 goals in this war: destroying Hamas and rescuing the hostages. And what can I say, Andrea? Sometimes it's very difficult to do both of them. And there had to be a decision here, basically continuing the war against Hamas, but also getting some of the hostages back. We have to proceed on the assumption that Hamas won't release all the hostages. The hostages are the Hamas's get out of Gaza free card. If we're Hamas to release all the hostages, we could go into those tunnels, we could flood the tunnels, and we could defeat Hamas, but they have the hostages. So what are you to do? You try to do the best of both. What we can say, what I can say, I think unequivocally, is that were it not for Israel's ground incursion, with all the controversy it generated with the 62 soldiers we lost, this negotiation would not have been possible. It was only by increasing the pressure on Hamas that Hamas actually came to them in some way to the negotiating table.
Jeremy Bash, the U.S. has a lot of concerns, though, about how that ground offensive and the air offensive, the bunker buster bombs in the refugee camp, some of the attacks, some of the ways that the hospitals were approached, the tactics of the war. They've been very open about that in recent weeks.
Well, they have, but President Biden, Andrea, has also been absolutely clear that Hamas is committing war crimes by putting tunnels and putting terrorist infrastructure in civilian areas, including in medical facilities, including in schools, including in people's homes. So I agree with Ambassador Oren. I think this is a good moment here, especially for the family of American citizens like Abigail, who, of course, should never have been taken in the first place, should never have seen her parents murdered in front of her own eyes. And it's sort of a moral outrage that Israel has to release 3 terrorists to get back baby Abigail. And here we are with 7 Americans that will remain in captivity in Hamas. And I don't think President Biden, Brett McGurk, Jake Sullivan, Tony Blinken will rest until all 7 of those other Americans are home back reunited with their family. And indeed, until all 180 other hostages are back from 30 nationalities with their families. And so this is a good moment, but I think I agree with Ambassador Oren that we can't give Hamas any credit for this. This terrible situation should never have occurred in the first instance. You're right, Andrea, that American advice, American intelligence, American targeting support to Israel has ensured that the campaign against Hamas becomes more precise over time. A ground campaign is more precise than an air campaign. And once Israel was able to go on the ground, I agree, they were able to put a lot of pressure on Hamas and drive to this moment where we can now have a humanitarian pause and an initial hostage release.
But Jeremy, let me ask, at what price in terms of the political outrage around the world that built, seeming to forget the savagery of October 7th all too soon? But what about the facts on the ground right now in foreign capitals with President Macron in France calling for a permanent ceasefire? What about that? And I, of course, would like Michael Oren to respond. Jeremy, you first.
Yeah, look, I think President Biden and his team have been absolutely clear, and I think they've been morally clear as well as strategically clear, which is a ceasefire would, in essence, give victory to Hamas. If you have a ceasefire, then Hamas could engage in another October 7th, take Abigail and other hostages again, and then we would be right back where we were. So there's not a thing where you have a permanent ceasefire against a terrorist organization that's willing to attack civilians. I do think, of course, some of the images in the early days of the campaign caused Israel to have to recalibrate its targeting, and they did that. In fact, they listened carefully to American advice. There was intelligence shared. There was capabilities shared. The American government has provided munitions to Israel. And in essence, that's been the strategy to try to contain some of this dynamic that you referenced.
Was it a mistake? Was the siege in part a mistake? I know you wanted to keep the pressure on, Ambassador, but denying fuel, which meant that there was a cell phone outage, where people could not reach each other. Thousands have died. All of the babies who have died because of the incubators, those in the NICUs. Could lives have been saved that didn't have to be lost, non-combatant lives, if there had been at least fewer deliveries and more aid?
Well, of course, lives could have been saved, Andrea, simply by having Hamas surrender and giving up the hostages. Everyone seems to have ignored that one option. Instead of calling Israel, to exercise greater caution in attacking Hamas, and I think that Israel goes to extraordinary lengths to exercise that caution. It's not a perfect science by any means, especially when Hamas is using its own populations as human shields. And we've encountered the same dynamic in every round of fighting with Hamas. But here, the one option which Macron and other international leaders seem to overlook is just calling for Hamas to give up, to surrender, and give back the hostages, and then everything stops. That's simple. And it never seems to occur to anybody. And it's a very simple solution. So, yes, Israel's going to continue to do its utmost to limit those civilian casualties. But as Jeremy Bass says, we have no alternative. We have to defeat Hamas militarily. We have 250,000 people who have been displaced, who don't have their homes. We won't be able to return them to their homes unless Hamas is removed. We won't be able to maintain any international deterrence power. If every bad actor like Iran internalizes that every time they attack Israel, the international community is going to tie our hands with a ceasefire, we can't exist. It's that simple.
Let me also ask you about complaints which were made most recently by David Remnick, the editor of The New Yorker, highly respected journalist, obviously, that Israel has been grabbing Palestinians along approved evacuation routes, including a celebrated Palestinian poet and New Yorker author, Mossab Abu Jaha, and others approved by the State Department for evacuation, going with his family, carrying his 3-year-old, taken from that line of people, taken from his family, taken to Israel, reportedly abused. We have no confirmation of that, but finally released. Why grab people seemingly indiscriminately? And apparently this is happening to many Palestinian men in Gaza as they try to leave.
So my sources are aware of this, and they understand the complexity and the potential controversy surrounding it. But they may be intellectuals, they may be writers, but they also may have had close contacts with Hamas, and they may also know the location of some of the hostages. And remember, that's our paramount goal here. And at the risk of creating that type of controversy, if we can save a single hostage life, it's worth it.
We'll have to leave it there. Michael Oren, thank you so much for joining us today. Jeremy Bash, and wishing both of you a good Thanksgiving with this agreement holding.
Thank you.
Thank you.